Hello, Summertime English 1102 students. Welcome to this video lecture on The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, before we get started on Poe, what I want you to do is go ahead, and you should be in the habit of this by now, but just in case you're not, go into the folder that you found this video in and the instructions for your essay and everything. Go ahead and open up that slideshow, the English 1102 slideshow, and then go to slide number 19, it looks like. Yeah. So go to slide number 19, which is where I'm at actually on my computer, where it has a picture of Edgar Allan Poe. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and you hit the pause button on your computer. Go find that file and go ahead and open it to slide number 19, and then follow along with me as I speak. All right, so we're back. Edgar Allan Poe. Notice how Allen is spelled, by the way. One thing I count off a lot for on student papers is that people want to spell Allen A-L-L-E-N, not A-N. So if you choose to write your paper on the Cask of Amontillado, make sure you spell Allen with an A, not with an E, in that spot between the L and the N there. So that's something to be cognizant of. All right, so Edgar Allan Poe, anytime anybody thinks of American Gothic fiction from the mid-1800s, usually Edgar Allan Poe is the first name to come up. You see, he died in about 1849, but he really had an understanding of the human psyche and how people think, particularly how deranged people think, even before Sigmund Freud came along and started writing papers about it and actually fathered what we now call modern-day psychiatry. So Poe actually predated Freud, and Freud to a certain extent did use Poe as inspiration for some of his studies. So that's something you may find interesting, especially as we analyze our narrator here in The Cask of Amontillado. Now, if you have this textbook, then what you're going to want to do is turn to page 199. Yes, that's the beginning of Cask of Amontillado. So go ahead and flip over to 199, and while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and speak a little bit more about the story. It's a story of revenge, of a revenge murder, if you will. So, Fortunato, and notice the irony of his name there, Fortunato. And it's an ironic name because he is going to die. He's probably the least fortunate man that could be possibly named Fortunato. But he actually has done something to insult Montresor, who is the actual head of his family. And Montresor is not going to let him get away with that. And we're going to look a little bit at why that might be. So if I go to the next slide, slide number 20, we'll start with the two settings. You've got two settings in Cask of Amontillado that are very, very different from each other. The first one is Carnival. Remember, when Montresor is looking for Fortunato so he can kind of lure him into his little trap, he goes to the carnival that's going on in the streets. Now, today's modern day carnivals would be something like Mardi Gras or something like Rio de Janeiro's Carnival, and there are other carnivals throughout the running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain, takes place during a carnival setting. So there are carnivals today. But today, carnivals are more about making money. Because, let's make no mistake about it, if New Orleans started losing money on Mardi Gras, they'd stop it right away. They would not want any part of it. So, today it's about money. But Carnival had a different purpose in the time that this story takes place, which is in Italy, probably somewhere, I want to say around the 14th or 15th century, somewhere in that time frame. There's no date in here, but it kind of suggests, the setting suggests that it would be about that time. Carnival at this time is a turning upside down of the social order. Carnival during this time is a time when the bosses clear out and allow the workers, the peon farmers, the nobodies essentially, to rise up and take charge of the streets and to act in any way they want to. They can drink, they can get drunk, they wear masks to protect their identities, which is what Fortunato is wearing at the carnival. Remember, he's dressed like a carnival jester, which is hilarious because He's supposed to be a very wealthy and very important man, and he's out there wearing a carnival jester suit. And oh, by the way, if you'll remember, he gets buried in that suit and dies in it. So, not that it matters to you what you're wearing after you die, but would you really want to be buried in a jester suit? I mean, come on. So anyway, so he's out there. Montresor uses this to his advantage. One of the questions that I want to raise about Montresor in this presentation, and some of you may write your papers on this, is Montresor a genius or is Montresor insane? Because I think there's evidence in this story that could point to either one of those possibilities. And some people have even gone ahead and argued that he is an insane genius, which would mean both. But we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. So, time of celebration. A time when the bosses are no longer the bosses. Remember, one of the activities of a carnival at this time was to elect somebody king for a day, and after a couple of hours, then that person was no longer the king and would be overthrown. And usually the king was not somebody of any importance in the social order. Usually it was one of the farmers or something like that. Very outdoorsy. It's very wide open spaces. It's occurring on a street. And it's bright. It's loud. It's colorful. There's all these great colors. There's all this music. There's all this confetti. It's a very festive time during Carnival. The other setting of this story is the crypts. To understand where the crypts are, families that had a lot of money at this time had basements, but they didn't just have like a normal basement like you might have in your house today. Their basements essentially were tunnels that went all under the city. And in these basements, not only would the rich store things like wine, the very reason why red wine was stored in these underground tunnels was because the room temperature would stay the same. So the wine would not spoil due to it getting too cold or due to it getting too hot. And remember, back then, wine came in wooden casks. There were not bottles of wine at the time. You had to actually put it in a wooden cask. And the wood that the cask was made out of would also flavor the wine to a certain extent. But these crypts also served a second purpose. And that was the wealthy would bury their dead in these crypts. So you have to understand that the wealthy families stored their wine in the same crypts that they actually buried their dead relatives in. How about that? So these crypts are dark. It requires light. In fact, if you remember the place where Montresor is going to chain Fortunato up is so dark that the torch can barely even light the room up. It's that dark under there. It's cramped. It's cool. There's nitra on the walls. Nitra, if you don't know what nitra is a poison that is made to actually, dynamite is made out of nitra. So it's an explosive poison, and this was all over the walls of the crypt. So as they're going through the crypts, and Montresor, acting like he's looking out for Fortunato's best interest, although this is that reverse psychology we're going to talk about in a minute. Oh, no, you're an important man and there's nitra. You don't want to breathe that in. Let's leave. I'll get Lucchesi to find out if this wine is Amontillado or not. And, of course, Fortunato's so full of pride, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, that this actually causes him to want to go deeper into there, even though he's probably going to die. I would say that after he got buried, he probably died from breathing in the nitra, probably more than starvation or thirst or whatever it was else that could have killed him while he was in that wall, bricked up in that wall. All right, so you've got those two different types of settings. Okay. Sorry about that. My phone was ringing, and it turns out it's not important. So that person can speak to my email. All right. Let's go to the next slide for a minute. This is where the question of whether or not Montresor, who is our narrator, is a genius or is an insane person comes into play. There is evidence here that he thought this crime all the way through. Look at my little checklist here of why this is a perfect crime. He never lets Fortunato think that he's in any danger. In fact, if you'll remember when you read this, if in our textbook, it is somewhere around page 201, towards the top of 201. It's about 2 pages or so in most sources. "The pipe," said he. "Oh, it's farther on, but observe the white web work which gleams on these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the room of intoxication. In other words, if you've ever seen anybody that's drunk and their eyes are red and glazed over, that's what Fortunato looks like at this point. "Nitra?" he asked at length. "Nitra," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." And as soon as he says there is Lucchesi, Fortunato tightens the noose around his own neck by saying, "Oh no, Lucchesi is an idiot. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and test this wine for you." So he never allows Fortunato to think he's in any danger, even up until about the point where he's about to put that last brick in the wall. Then I think is when it becomes obvious to Fortunato that Montresor's intentions are not good. He waited until the perfect moment to commit the crime, that of course being Carnival. In Carnival, everybody is wearing masks. He wore a mask when he found Fortunato. If there was a police investigation, who was the last person that you saw Fortunato with? The answer would be, I couldn't tell you because he was wearing a mask and a reliquaire, which is essentially a hooded cape. He could not have committed this murder during Christmas. He could not have committed this murder on 4th of July, even though there wasn't such a thing as a 4th of July holiday back then. He could not have committed this murder at any time other than Carnival. And that is important. Fortunato has a fatal flaw that Montresor managed to exploit. And that fatal flaw is pride. He is a very proud man. And if you decide to do this as your research paper, I don't remember the name of the scholar that's going to point this out, but it looks like Montresor may be from old money and Fortunato may be from new money. Or he may not have as high a title as Montresor does. But he kind of, with the insult, in fact, this is actually why some people say, well, him murdering, Montresor murdering Fortunato over an insult might not be as ridiculous as you think when you think back to Montresor maybe have a higher title and Fortunato insulted him, and Montresor is like, there is no way that an earl is supposed to, or actually, there's no way that a duke is supposed to insult an earl. Therefore, I must kill him to save my family name and save my pride. So, but speaking of pride, Fortunato's pride is what leads him to his doom. Because he thinks that nobody knows how to taste wine as well as he does. Especially not that guy, Lucchesi, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So, anytime you want to exploit somebody, anytime you want to get away with, say, murder, the best thing to do is almost always to find out what their fatal flaw is and exploit it. And that's what Montresor has done here. All right. He knew the servants would not be home. I want to take a look at that passage. That is very early on in the story. This would be about one page in. In our book is on page 200 towards the bottom. So it'd be about one page in. And listen to what it says here. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. Again, this is Carnival. So they had absconded. They had left the house. Every attendant I had, every maid, every butler, every cook, everybody I had left this home in order to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them I should not return until the morning and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance one and all, as soon as my back is turned. Some of you may have children, some of you may not. If you have children, how often does it happen that you tell your child you are not allowed to do X? Child knows that he won't be caught doing X, so as soon as you turn your back, guess what the child does? Exactly what you told him not to do. That is what Montresor here exploits. He exploits the fact that he knows that if he tells his servants, you are not allowed to go to carnival, but I won't catch you because I'm not coming home till in the morning, that as soon as it looks like he is gone for the night, every servant in the house is going to say, and out they go and into the carnival. So this is very brilliant on his part. All right. He committed the crime where no one would look for Fortunato. Who would dare to go into the crypts and start looking for a dead body? Not unless they have reason to go into those crypts. And even if they did, remember, he walled him in behind some brick. So even then, it would probably be unlikely that he would get caught. And then he stayed silent about the murder for 50 years. Now, this could be a part of his insanity, or this could be a part of his genius. This raises this question. Because at the very end, the very last line of this, it doesn't even matter what source you got, it's the very last line. In our book, it's on page 204. The very last two sentences. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old ramparts of bones. For half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them in pace requiescat, which, as you can see, means may he rest in peace. Half a century, that's 50 years. He has been silent about this for 50 years. So he got away with it, essentially. Now, this raises the question. Who is our man, Montresor, speaking to 50 years after the fact? And why now? Why now does he feel the need to confess this crime? Read into that what you will. I'm going to propose the idea that he is probably making a deathbed confession to a priest to get this off of his soul, so that he will be, he will have confessed it and had to done whatever penance he's had to do in order to get into heaven. That is going to be my theory about why now he would actually say this. I think if you're going to do this as your research paper, others will agree with me. So, it's the perfect crime, and he got away with it for 50 years. Lucchesi. Let us speak a moment about Lucchesi. Lucchesi never appears in this story. We never meet Lucchesi. We never see Lucchesi. Lucchesi is a ghost for all we know. And yet, he drives the story forward because he is also a wine expert, and yet Fortunato will not accept that Lucchesi could possibly know as much about wine as he does. In fact, he calls Lucchesi a fool. He does not know. Remember what he says. He doesn't know an Amontillado from a sherry. For those of you that don't know anything about wine, which is probably most of you, Amontillado is a type of sherry. It's a different type of sherry made with a different grape and made a different way. And it's supposed to be a high-end sherry. So just like with the beers, you've got the craft beers that are more expensive than, say, Pabst Blue Ribbon. Same thing with Amontillado and sherry. Sherry is the Pabst Blue Ribbon, Amontillado is the craft beer. So even though Lucchesi never makes an appearance, he drives the action forward because Montresor is always saying, I'll ask Lucchesi, to which Fortunato says, you will not ask Lucchesi. I know the answer. Lead me the way. Or lead me to the Amontillado. All right. And then, of course, I just asked the final question there. Who is Montresor confessing the crime to? And again, I'm going to say it's likely to a priest on his deathbed. Now, I'm going to go through this and see if there's anything I'm missing. So you don't really need the slideshow anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize mine. All right. Nothing in feminist theory. All right. Trace the way the narrator lures Fortunato to his death. I think you don't really need my help for that. How does Lucchesi drive the action, even though he never appears in the story? He is the guy that Fortunato keeps calling on in order to commit the murder. All right, let's see. How does the reader know that Montresor is a very wealthy man in the Cask of Amontillado? And what clues in the story that Fortunato's insult of Montresor may be that Fortunato overstepped his own social status? We know that Montresor is very, very wealthy. He has a big house. He has family crypts underneath. He can afford the most expensive wines. And he has servants. And he has title. He has a family crest, which has the Latin saying, I don't remember what it is, but it basically says, no one insults me with impunity. So this is kind of a Montresor trait, is that nobody can get away with insulting us. That shows he's got a lot of money. Fortunato does not react like a refined, titled person. He goes out in carnival with the peons and parties with them. He wants to be one of them. He gets drunk off his, gourd. He is wearing a jester suit. He sometimes in the story almost tries to get too buddy-buddy with Montresor, and Montresor kind of doesn't like this much. So imagine if you would just walking up to President Obama right now and say, Mr. Barack, hey buddy, what's going on? Slapping him on the back, hey, how's it going? And you can bet that the Secret Service would probably tackle you and carry you away in handcuffs, ankle cuffs, and dragging you out by the hair of your head, if you have any. Maybe Fortunato has done something similar to that, and that is where his insult comes in. No way should somebody of a lower title insult somebody of a higher title. So there's that. We've talked about the settings and how the crypts can kind of symbolize the insanity or the deepest, darkest resources of Montresor's mind, and then of course why is Carnival the ideal time to carry this out. We've already discussed that. So that's it. That's my video lecture on Cask of Amontillado. I hope you found it informative. I hope that you can use a lot of the good information that I've gotten here. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact me during my office hours. Thank you.